Okay, so let's start today by flipping the usual script a bit.
Mm.
For the last 2 years or so, pretty much every time you saw a headline that combined universities and artificial intelligence, you basically knew exactly what the story is going to be before you even clicked it.
Oh, absolutely. It is always about the students. Always.
Always. It's that whole panic narrative, you know the one. Students using ChatGPT to write their essays or finding shortcuts. The death of homework.
Right. The great cheating epidemic.
Exactly. We have all read those op-eds and seen the tweets. But today, we are actually looking at the other side of the desk.
And frankly, that is where the real revolution is happening right now. Because while everyone is so focused on watching the students, the professors were quietly and honestly drastically changing how the university actually functions.
That is the mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking a brand new report from Anthropic that was released just recently in August 2025. It's titled The Anthropic Education Report: How Educators Use Claude. And we aren't just talking about a few random anecdotes here.
No, not at all. To give you a sense of the credibility here, Anthropic didn't just send out some SurveyMonkey link to a couple of faculty mailing lists.
Right.
They actually performed a back-end analysis of approximately 74,000 anonymized conversations on their platform, Claude.ai.
74,000. That is a massive sample size.
It really is. And this data covers May and June of 2025. They specifically filtered for accounts that were associated with higher education email addresses, so basically your .edu accounts. They essentially took this massive privacy-preserved X-ray of what is happening inside the faculty lounge.
And just to add a little human element to that massive data set, they also partnered with Northeastern University. They got qualitative feedback from 22 faculty members there, basically the power users, so to speak.
Right, exactly. So we get the what from the big data and the why from the actual human interviews.
Now, before we get into the specific stats, which honestly blew me away, I want to set the stage with a number that jumped out at me right from the report's intro. They cite a Gallup survey where teachers reported that using AI saved them an average of 5.9 hours per week.
That is just an enormous amount of time. I mean, think about that for a second. That is nearly a full working day reclaimed every single week.
Yeah.
That's time you get back for research, for mentoring students, or honestly just for sleeping.
It's huge. But here is the twist that I really love, and I think it perfectly sets the tone for everything we are about to discuss today. The report mentions that students have arguably begun expressing concern about the professors using AI.
It's a complete reversal of the fear.
Total reversal. Now, the student is the one sitting there wondering, is a human actually reading my final paper, or did a bot just grade me?
It introduces this really fascinating and slightly dystopian dynamic of mutual suspicion. The student uses AI to write the paper, and the professor uses AI to grade the paper.
Just bots talking to bots.
Basically. But to understand if that fear is actually justified, we have to look at what the professors are genuinely doing with the tech.
Right. So let's dive into the usage data. I think the cynical assumption, the one a lot of people make, is that professors are just using this to slack off.
Oh, sure. Write an email to the dean or draft a syllabus policy.
Yeah, exactly. Just administrative fluff. But the data paints a very different picture.
It really does. And just a quick technical note on how they actually figured this out, because obviously, Anthropic can't read the specific messages due to privacy constraints. They used a classification tool to match the types of tasks being performed against the ONET database.
ONET.
Yeah, it's the U.S. Department of Labor's primary database for occupational information. It breaks down every single job-like post-secondary teacher into specific constituent tasks.
Okay, so Anthropic's algorithm could look at a prompt and basically say, okay, this matches the ONET definition of developing curriculum.
That's exactly it. It's like a digital fingerprint for work tasks.
That is incredibly clever. So when they ran this massive analysis, what actually came out on top?
By a landslide, the #1 use case was developing curricula. 57% of the analyzed conversations were focused on this.
57%.
Yeah.
That is honestly way higher than I expected. But when we say developing curricula, are we just talking about asking it to update a reading list for the fall?
Oh, no, it's much deeper than that. We are talking about deep instructional design. It's analyzing the entire flow of a semester or generating lesson plans from scratch, brainstorming analogies for really complex concepts, or structuring an entire 14-week arc for a new class.
So the AI is acting more like an architect.
Architectural partner is actually a really great way to put it. One of the Northeastern professors specifically mentioned using it to bounce ideas off of, It totally solves the blank page problem.
Right, because staring at a blank syllabus is daunting.
Exactly. If you are trying to design a brand new course on, say, the history of digital privacy, you can ask the AI to draft a 12-week structure, suggest seminal readings, and create learning objectives.
And then you just edit it.
Right, you edit it, of course, but the heavy lifting of that initial structure is done in seconds instead of weeks.
That makes so much sense. It allows the professor to actually focus on the specific content rather than the tedious logistics of calendar dates and formatting.
Well,
It's kind of like having a really smart teaching assistant who happens to have read every syllabus in existence.
pretty much.
So if curriculum is number one, what were the runners-up?
Coming in at number 2 with 13% was conducting academic research. And then at number 3, way down at 7%, was assessing student performance.
Only 7% for assessment.
Yeah,
That seems incredibly low given how much anxiety there is about AI grading.
it is low, and that is a specific point of tension we will definitely dig into later because the sheer volume doesn't really tell the whole story there. But there is a hidden statistic here that I think is even more revealing about the mindset of these professors. When Anthropic spoke to the faculty directly, the humans at Northeastern, they said they actually spent about 29% of their time using AI for personal learning.
Personal learning, you mean the professors are studying?
Exactly, professors teaching themselves new things. But the automated ONet analysis couldn't catch this at all.
Why not?
Because to a matching algorithm, a professor asking, explain the implications of quantum entanglement on cryptography looks exactly the same as a sophomore asking it. It doesn't look like professional work. It just looks like curiosity.
Oh, wow. That is a really cool insight. It suggests that AI is really helping professors stay current in their fields. Because in a world where things change so incredibly fast, the professor really has to be a student too.
Precisely. It allows them to bridge gaps in their own knowledge instantly so they can bring that fresh context right into the classroom. But naturally, they are also still doing the boring stuff too. The report lists administrative tasks like drafting recommendation letters, creating meeting agendas, and even developing vocational workforce training content.
Recommendation letters.
Yeah.
That feels like a minefield. Dear Admissions Committee, insert name here is a delight.
Oh, it is definitely risky if you don't edit it heavily, but it really highlights the massive desire to offload the bureaucratic weight of the job. Writing 50 unique letters of recommendation every spring is a massive time sink.
Oh, I can't even imagine. So
Yeah.
we have curriculum design as the clear winner. But then the report shifts into something that I think is technically very significant for the future of education.
Yeah.
It talks about a move from treating AI as a chatbot to using it as a builder.
Yes.
And this involves the artifacts feature. For the listener who hasn't used Claude specifically or who's mostly used to just a standard chat window, can you explain what an artifact is and why it changes the game so much?
Sure. So for the first few years of this whole LLM boom, the interface was just a chat stream. You ask a question and you get a wall of text back.
Right.
Artifacts completely changes the UI. It allows the AI to actually generate code or documents or interactive windows in a separate dedicated panel right side by side with the chat.
So instead of the AI just describing how a game works in text, it can actually code and render the game right there in your browser window.
Exactly. And this has ushered in what the report calls the builder era for educators. They aren't just generating text anymore, they're building fully functional tools. The report lists examples like escape rooms, platform games, and full-on scientific simulations.
Give me a concrete example from the data. What is a professor actually building with this?
Sure. There was a really specific mention of a chemistry stoichiometry game.
Stoichiometry.
Wow.
That brings back some very painful high school memories.
For most of us, yes. But imagine if instead of a dry worksheet, the professor sent you a link to a browser game where you actually have to balance the chemical equations to fuel a spaceship.
That is amazing.
Right. And before AI, building something like that would require a computer science team, and probably 6 months of development time.
Yeah, at least.
Now, a chemistry professor can just describe what they want in Claude, and the artifact renders the playable interactive game in minutes.
That totally democratizes the creation of educational software. You don't need to know a single line of JavaScript. You just need to know chemistry and how to write a good prompt.
Correct. The professor provides the deep pedagogy, and the AI just handles the syntax. They also mention interactive visualizations, things like historical timelines where students can seamlessly zoom in on specific decades, or complex budget planning tools for admin that actually export to PDF.
It effectively turns every single professor into a software engineer.
And it changes the entire value proposition of the lecture itself. If you can build a custom simulation for free, active learning becomes the default experience, not just a rare exception. You aren't just talking at the students anymore. You are giving them bespoke tools to play with.
I really love that vision. But I want to pivot to the philosophical core of this report because I think this is so crucial. They introduce a framework called augmentation versus automation. I feel like this is exactly where all the societal anxiety lives right now. Are the robots helping us, or are they straight up replacing us?
This is the critical distinction. So the report defines augmentation as a task where the human remains firmly in the loop. They are collaborating, refining, and guiding the output.
Oh.
Automation, on the other hand, is where you just hand the task entirely off to AI and walk away.
So, looking at the actual data, where are the humans holding the line? Where is augmentation winning out?
The data is actually quite reassuring for anyone worried about the imminent death of the professor. The highest augmentation rates are in teaching and classroom instruction. That sits at 77.4% augmentation.
Nice.
Grant writing is at 70%, and advising is at 67.5%.
Okay, so for the absolute core identity of a professor actually teaching, advising students, and getting funding, they are working with the AI. They aren't just handing it off.
Right, and the report does a good job explaining why. These tasks require incredibly deep context. You can't just tell an AI to plan a lesson on the Civil War and expect it to resonate with your specific group of students in your specific university context.
Obviously not.
One professor noted, quote, AI needs guidance on the level of material and context with regard to what we have already covered.
That makes total sense. And grant writing, too. A grant is fundamentally an argument. It's an exercise in persuasion.
Yeah.
You really need a human voice to sell the vision of the research, even if the AI helps structure the proposal or format the citations.
Exactly. One professor in the report actually called it being a thought partner, not a thought substitute. It's about leveraging the AI to clear out the mental clutter so you as the expert can focus on the high-level strategy.
I really like that phrasing. Thought partner, not a substitute. But let's look at the other side of the spectrum. Where are the robots actually taking over? Where's the automation happening?
Finance and fundraising came in at 65% automation, and admissions and enrollment was right around 44.7% automation.
The spreadsheets.
The spreadsheets, the endless data entry. Educators are very happy to fully automate the drudgery, the routine record keeping, and the financial management.
Which honestly seems like a massive win for everyone involved. If my professor spends less time balancing the department budget and more time refining their actual lecture on Shakespeare, the students win big time.
Ideally, yes. The goal is to clear the decks so the human can be more human. But there is a very messy middle ground here. And this brings us to the most controversial part of the entire report: grading.
Yes, let's get into grading. You mentioned earlier that assessment was only 7% of the total conversations. But when you look inside that 7%, something really weird is happening.
This is where the ethical disconnect really lies. While it wasn't the most frequent use case by any means, nearly half of those grading interactions, 48.9% to be exact, were classified as automation heavy.
Wait, so almost half the time they use AI for grading, they're just letting the AI do the work entirely. Like, here's the essay, just give me a grade.
That appears to be exactly the case in the usage data, and this stands in stark contrast to what the faculty actually said in the qualitative surveys. Because when asked directly, professors rated grading as the area where AI was least effective.
So they are saying it's bad at grading. They are saying they probably shouldn't do it, but the behavioral data suggests they are doing it anyway. Why the disconnect?
Honestly, fatigue, the sheer volume of work, it is universally the task professors hate the most. But doing this creates a massive ethical dilemma. There was a quote from a Northeastern professor that really struck me. They said, "Students are not paying tuition for the LLM's time, they're paying for my time."
Oof, that hits hard. They're paying for my time. Because think about it from the student perspective. If I spend all weekend writing a 10-page paper, pouring my soul into the research, and you spend 3 seconds pasting it into Claude to spit out a B+, I am going to feel entirely cheated. I'm going to feel like the fundamental contract of education is broken.
It absolutely breaks the pedagogical contract. And practically speaking, it is just risky. Professors who actively experimented with full automation found it, quote, simply not good enough.
What were the specific issues with it?
It misses the subtle nuance of a good argument. It hallucinates errors that aren't actually there. And it tends to be either overly agreeable and generic or oddly harsh, depending on how you tweak the prompt.
But is there a middle ground here? Is all AI grading inherently evil, or is there a way to do it right?
The report suggests a really important nuance between high-stakes grading and formative feedback.
Break that down for us.
Sure. High-stakes grading is your final exam or your massive term paper. That absolutely needs a human. Formative feedback is low stakes. It's the daily quizzes, practice problems, early drafts.
Okay.
Some professors are actively building tools that give students instant feedback on those things.
Like the chemistry game we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
If I get the stoichiometry answer wrong, the AI tells me why immediately, right then and there. That isn't grading me. That is coaching me.
Exactly. That is a learning tool. But taking a stack of 50 dense research papers and saying, grade these for me, is where the ethical line is being drawn. And occasionally, as the data shows, crossed. It's this fascinating space where the demand for efficiency directly collides with professional responsibility.
And this tension between what AI can do and what humans should do is forcing the classroom itself to change. The report specifically calls this reshaping the classroom.
Yes. It's this concept of cognitive offloading. Professors are realizing that if an AI can do the technical rote task perfectly, they have to radically change what they ask the students to do in the first place.
There was a great example about computer science and coding in the report.
Yes, a computer science professor mentioned they simply no longer teach debugging commas and semicolons.
Which, as anyone who has ever learned to code knows, is easily the most annoying, soul-crushing part of the whole process.
Right. Missing one bracket and the whole thing crashes. But the AI is perfect at syntax. It doesn't make those typos. So the professor now focuses entirely on, quote, concepts around the application of analytics. They have essentially moved up the abstraction ladder.
I see.
They aren't teaching the basic syntax anymore. They are teaching the fundamental logic.
It's exactly like how calculators changed math class decades ago. You eventually stop doing long division by hand and you start doing calculus. But what about writing? The report had a pretty bold statement from a professor about research papers.
It really did. One professor stated flat out they will never again assign a traditional research paper.
Never again. That feels like the end of an era. I mean, the research paper is the absolute staple of the university experience.
They said that after seeing way too many AI-written submissions, they realized the format itself was dead. It is just too easy to fake now.
So what do they actually do instead? If you kill the essay, how do you grade critical thinking?
You have to make the assignments AI-proof.
AI-proof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that sounds like quite a challenge. How exactly do you do that?
You design assignments that are so incredibly complex or so deeply tied to real-world context or so specific to what happened in the classroom that very day that a generic bot simply cannot solve them.
So a prompt like, write a paper about Hamlet's themes is totally dead.
Yeah.
But something like, compare Hamlet's indecision to the specific discussion we had in class on Tuesday regarding modern political paralysis, that works.
Exactly. It forces the student to actually be present in the room. There was a really funny anecdote about this in the report, too. A student actually complained to their professor that the weekly homework was too hard to do, and they were super annoyed because Claude and ChatGPT were completely useless for completing it.
And the professor's reaction?
The professor told them, quote, that was a compliment.
I love that.
Yeah.
Basically saying, I beat the bot.
It highlights a really interesting conceptual shift. If the AI can do your homework for you, your homework probably wasn't worth doing in the first place. The professors are essentially being forced to raise the bar for everyone.
It's basically an arms race, but one that might actually make education fundamentally better.
Ideally, yes. It forces true critical thinking. If the machine handles all the rote mechanical work, the human mind must handle the unique insight.
Now, before we get too carried away with this utopian vision of AI-proof super students, we definitely need to apply some skepticism here. Let's talk about the limitations. We cannot just take this single report as the gospel truth for every university in the world right now.
No, definitely not. We have to be very realistic about the data sources here. First off, the sample size of the identification process. Anthropic only captured about 1.5% of all higher ed conversations because their ONET filter was incredibly strict.
Right.
They only looked for things that were obviously and undeniably educator tasks.
So if a professor was using Claude to write a poem for their spouse's birthday, or just brainstorming broadly about political science, that wouldn't be counted in this data at all.
Exactly. We are looking at a very specific, highly professional slice of usage. Also, this data is strictly limited to Claude.ai. It doesn't account for ChatGPT Gemini or, crucially, any enterprise tools that universities might have installed locally that are totally walled off from these data sets.
And the timing, too. The data is from May and June of 2025.
That is a huge variable. Think about the academic calendar. May and June are the very end of the spring semester and the start of the summer session.
Ah, okay. So we might see a lot more curriculum planning because professors are prepping for the fall semester and maybe a lot less routine grading than we would in, say, November or December.
Right, exactly. The absolute dominance of the curriculum category might be partly seasonal. And finally, let's be real about who is actually using Claude heavily in mid-2025.
It is definitely not everyone.
No, these are the power users, the early adopters. This data does not represent the professor who has been using the exact same yellowed lecture notes since 1990 and still refuses to use the university email system.
The overhead projector crowd is definitely not captured in this data set.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So we are really looking at the vanguard here, not the broad average.
So pulling back from all the data and the anecdotes, let's wrap this up. What is the big core takeaway here for you?
The summary is really this. Educators are actively automating the boring stuff, the finance, the endless admin, so they can genuinely augment the creative stuff, the teaching, the interactive simulations. But there is a very messy middle ground specifically around grading where the ethical norms are still actively being worked out in real time.
It feels like we are in a massive transition period.
We really are. The report describes it as a moment of active experimentation. We are moving away from viewing AI as just a neat tool or a student cheat code to viewing it as a core structural partner in the educational process.
It is so fascinating. We started this deep dive talking about the whole cultural fear of students cheating.
Yeah.
But looking at all this data, it really seems like the professors are actually the ones pushing the boundaries of what this tech can really do. They are using it to survive the workload and, frankly, to keep higher education relevant.
Absolutely. When the basic tools of knowledge work change, the craft of teaching has to change along with it.
So here is my final thought for you, the listener, and I think this is really something to chew on. We talked about professors designing these AI-proof assignments right, making things much harder, more contextually complex so the bots just can't do them. But we also talked about professors actively using AI as an architectural partner to help them design those exact same assignments.
Right.
So if the professors are using advanced AI to build harder tests, and the students are inevitably going to use advanced AI to try to solve them, are we just entering a bizarre educational arms race where bots are basically battling bots? Or is this actually the start of a renaissance? Are we pushing both the teacher and the student to a level of critical thinking we have never actually had to reach before, simply because all the easy answers are now completely free?
That really is the ultimate question. When the floor rises, the ceiling has to rise too.
Exactly. I guess we will find out when the next round of data comes out. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Keep learning and maybe keep building.
See you next time.